If you're going to take anything away from this video, please let it be this. We, as Final Fantasy fans, need to give more love and attention to Final Fantasy V. It is easily, without a shadow of doubt in my mind, one of the most underrated games I have ever played. From the simple yet interesting story, to the lovable and sometimes hilarious characters, to the incredibly unique tone of whimsy perfectly blended with the emotional, to the themes that tie every game element together, to the gameplay, which I can't begin to put in a couple words because of just how special it is. I love Final Fantasy V, and I can't wait to tell you why in today's video. But before we begin properly, I want to set some important ground rules, namely two things. One, the thoughts, opinions and analysis here are based almost entirely on the game viewed from a second playthrough. This has been the case in all my videos so far, and for something like Final Fantasy IV, it hasn't been relevant enough to mention. But here, it is extremely relevant, especially when we get to talking in depth about the job system. 2. If you've seen any of my previous videos, which by the way, if you have, welcome back. Thank you so much, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. You'll notice this video will be structured a little differently. Previously, I tried to structure my videos like this diagram on screen. They were essentially plot summaries, with tangentially relevant talking points sprinkled throughout. This time though, I'm going to do things a little differently. I'll start with the full retelling of the game's story and key moments. Then, jump into the big key talking points in the order detailed on screen right now. I've also put timestamps in the video, so if you're interested in only this or that, you can jump around as you please. Okay, that's enough waffle I reckon. Welcome to Final Fantasy V. The world of Final Fantasy V had it good. The great kingdoms of Tycoon, Waltz and Karnak ruled the world in peace, respectfully keeping to their own territories while their people lived in splendour. But the wealth came at a cost, and the one bearing it was the world itself, namely its emblems, the 4 elemental crystals. Using technology, the Kingdom of Tycoon enhanced the power of the wind to allow free and easy travel across the world. The Kingdom of Waltz enhanced the Quartz Crystal to purify the surrounding waters, protecting the people from danger and supplying the nation with prosperous resources. The Kingdom of Karnak enhanced the power of the Fire Crystal to make incredible technological advancements, building a great ship more powerful than the people had ever seen. And then there was the Earth Crystal, the only one not being strained by enhancement, but still brittle from years of amplification long ago. Our story begins with the consequences of this overuse making themselves apparent. Atop Castle Tycoon, the wind has grown quiet, and the King of Tycoon is preparing to fly to the Wind Shrine to investigate why. Being wished well by his daughter, the Princess of Tycoon, as well as one of our upcoming main party members, Lena, he flies to the shrine atop the world's last living Windrake, Hiryu. A short while later, disaster strikes. The wind dies completely. We see the king in front of the crystal, which shatters. It's on this note we are introduced to this game's protagonist, Bartz, relaxing in a forest with his trusty chocobo named Boko. He is shaken into action though when a second surprise strikes the world. It literally strikes this time too. A meteorite comes crashing down in a forest near Tycoon. We rush over to find Lena unconscious, being carried away by goblins. Defeating them, we awake her, together investigating the meteorite to discover that someone was actually inside it. The meteorite's rocky landing, pun very intended, seems to have left an impact on the man. He can only remember his name. This is Galuf, our third main party member. Galuf isn't completely aimless in his amnesia. After Lena tells the group of her heading to the Wind Shrine to check the crystal, Galuf feels compelled to come with. He also feels a need to go there. However, Bartz doesn't follow. Before all else, he is a wanderer. Left on our own, we explore a bit before winding up in a canyon. Boko bucks Bartz off his back, wordlessly communicating to him he should really go help the two reach the Wind Shrine. Recognizing the danger about, he reluctantly agrees. Rushing to help the pair from a landslide, Bartz rescues them before agreeing to join their quest. It seems the insatiable wanderer also feels the wind calling to him. To make their way across the ocean separating them from the shrine, the trio try to commandeer a pirate ship found in a nearby hideout. This proves unsuccessful though, as they are ambushed and locked up by the pirate captain, Faris, spared a worse fate due to Faris' recognition of a pendant Lena has. Taking the night to think on it, Faris releases the party, agreeing to ferry them to the shrine with the aid of her friend, the serpent Sildra, along with joining the party as its final member. Landing at the shrine, we come to discover it overrun by monsters. Working our way through, the party discovers what we have already seen. The wind crystal has shattered. The amplification of its power caused it to break. It's on this note we are taken to the 3 other other crystals listed around the world who bestow onto the party a blessing each. Faris receives the essence of flame, courage, Lena the essence of water, devotion, Galuf the essence of earth, hope, and from the empty pedestal where the wind crystal lies broken, it too gives a blessing to Bartz, passion. Having received this blessing, the King of Tycoon returns to brief us on our quest. We are the world of Final Fantasy V's chosen, its warriors of light. We must protect the remaining 3 crystals from not only the machine slowly destroying them, but a mastermind behind it all who wishes to return all to darkness. To aid us on our journey, the shards of the broken crystal coalesce onto the party, blessing us with the powers of ancient warriors who we can embody through the power of the crystals. These are the job crystals, the source of our party's power. After a reasonably big day for our group, we take this calm before the storm to rest the night in the nearby town of Toul. While Faris rests in the inn amongst her pirate crew, the rest of our party spend the night with Zoc. He is a friend of Lena's father and has the key needed to open the canal which blocks the passage to Waltz. Making a hard choice to send his friend's daughter on a life-threatening mission for the sake of the world, Zoc hands Bartz the key, giving our party the means to proceed. Leaving Toul, Faris bids farewell to her pirate crew as the party fully embark on their grand adventure. Taking a ship into the canal, we are sucked into a whirlpool, separating us from Sildra and setting us adrift across the unfamiliar waters. We wash up at the ship graveyard, which we traverse our way through. After defeating the siren blocking the way, we make our way back onto the world map. However, we have a new problem. We need to reach Waltz so that we can warn them that the amplification of the water crystal will shatter it. However, the way is blocked by a mountain range. We are only able to reach the small port town of Carwin on foot, and given the wind has died, we can't sail from there. It's only upon hearing of a wind drake on the North Mountain do we get an idea. Lena recognizes it as her father's, Hiryu, likely trying to recover from a wound using the dragon grass that only grows there. If we can help heal the drake, then chances are we can ride on it to Waltz. At the North Mountain, we begin our climb, facing trials and tribulations such as the pair Magissa and Forza, who are handily defeated. At the top, we find Hiryu on the brink of death. To save him, Lena walks through multiple poisonous flowers to get the grass, nearly dying herself in the process. But her benevolence is rewarded when, after Faris feeds the grass to the drake, it heals Lena in tow. Everyone is okay, and it's on that good news we are able to mount Hiryu and take him to the Kingdom of Waltz. Arriving at the castle, we rush to speak with the king, urging him to stop amplifying the crystal. He initially dismisses us, seeing our claims as unfounded. We don't have long to make our case though, as another meteorite begins its crash course towards Earth, landing right next to the Tower of Waltz. The king immediately mobilizes his men and rushes over, wishing to assess the damage, but they are in for a rude surprise. A normally peaceful animal, Garula, has started rampaging, taking down the king's men inside the tower, going as deep as the crystal room. We make it just in time to see Garula fight and take down a knight in strangely coloured armour. All the ones we have seen up to this point have been blue, but this guy is dressed in red. We subdue Garula. However, the crystal has already been put under too much strain and shatters. Before dying, the Red Knight apologizes to Galuf for not protecting the crystal. Whoever Galuf is, he must be quite important. Left alone in the room, we gather the shards of the crystals, obtaining our next set of jobs. The land beneath the tower then begins to violently shake. We are saved in the surprise return of Sildra, who uses the last ounce of strength she has to take the party to safety, dying in the process. With 2 crystals down, the party's next destination is clear. They need to stop Karnak from destroying the fire crystal. Back in Waltz, we not only get the aim confirmed to us by the king, but the method by this wounded soldier resting in the infirmary. He reveals that the Karnak and Waltz meteorites are actually linked, inside them resting a teleporter that can be used to travel between them. After a quick jaunt back to Tycoon on Hiryu, we make the leap and travel across the world, eventually arriving in Karnak. Here, the situation is similar, yet different. We hear more about this from Final Fantasy V Cid, who was locked up by the possessed Queen of Karnak for speaking out against the effects of amplification technology he invented are having on the health of the crystals. At that time, Karnak was not sure of the correlation, but the Chancellor coming to free Cid and us are the confirmation that they are now sure and need our help. We dive deep into the fire-powered ship on a mission to stop the amplification. While we may think we are successful when we slay the creature possessing the Queen, a possessed soldier coming and reactivating the machine are a notification that we are not, in fact, successful. It's only through the will of a werewolf, another warrior who recognizes Galuf, that we are able to escape before the implosion. Now outside the destroyed remains of Castle Karnak, the shards of the shattered crystal find us, bestowing the third batch of jobs. These events have, understandably, demoralized and discouraged Cid. It's in lieu of restoring his spark that the party heads to the nearby Library of the Ancients, a massive collection of ancient texts filled with scholars. We hear here of Mir, Cid's grandson, who after finding in the depths of the library and notifying of Cid's condition, agrees to travel back to Karnak to support his grandfather. And his efforts are successful. Cid regains his motivation and gets to work with his grandson on repairing the fire-powered ship to not run on fire. While they do so, we hear a little more from Galuf, who has partially regained his memory after being struck with the thought of his granddaughter, Kryl. His revelations are shocking and incredibly important. He is not from this world, and travelled here from his own using the meteorite that had crashed in the opening. That means that all the unusual warriors that we have met so far were in similar situations. They travelled to what we will start referring to as Bartz's world from Galuf's world. But why? Why is the weakening of the crystals causing these otherworldly warriors to come? Well, 30 years ago, Galuf, alongside others from another world who together were called the Dawn Warriors, faced an incredible evil, the warlock Exdeath, who was attacking Galuf's world. Try as they might, they couldn't defeat him, no matter how many times he was felled. So the solution? They would seal him instead, but not on their world, Bartz's, using the power of the crystals. One of the warriors, a man named Dorgan, stayed on this world though. He felt guilty leaving such an evil here. So he settled down in the town of Lix, eventually giving birth to a son. Said son is Bartz. This reveal will come later, but is important to mention now. When the crystals began to weaken, partially due to the amplification, but also due to Exdeath's meddling, Galuf travelled here to stop it. This reveal sets up the core of the story to come. We must defeat Exdeath and return both worlds to peace. A valuable tool to achieve this aim is the freshly repaired fire-powered ship. Yes, a very valuable tool. That is for like 30 seconds. As arriving at the Crescent Moon Island, the ship is swallowed by a massive whirlpool and, unknown to the party, stored in the ancient base of Catapult. For now though, we are stranded here. After learning a little from the sleepy town of Crescent, we travel to a chocobo forest outside the city. Helping the chocobo cough up 2 shards of the fire crystal, yes, they were blown onto the other side of the earth. Yes, this isn't the only time it happens, and yes, this isn't the lightest item to be blown across the world. We unlock 2 extra jobs, as well as gain the ability to fly atop the chocobo. After a long period of exploration, including an important homecoming for Bart in the town of Lix, we arrive back at the Library of the Ancients, where Cid and Mid are studying. Alerting them to the ship sinking, they brush us off, more interested in the breaking and personally pressing news for Lena. The King of Tycoon has been spotted. He was seen near Karnak, entering the shifting sands to reach the town of Ruin on the other side, the rough location of the Earth Crystal. To intercept him, we find a way to travel through the shifting sands by using a slain sandworm as a bridge, cornering the king in the ruins of a chapel. However, this isn't the king, or at least not the same one we met in the opening or who acted as the guide for our quest. This reveal is paired with another. Faris is not just a pirate, she is the long-lost sister of Lena, a princess of Tycoon named Cerisa. We can hear more of her story from our trip back to Tycoon earlier, but this revelation defines her relationship with Lena as the most solid in our party. Back to the king, he activates a trap, dropping us into Catapult. But you said Catapult was under Crescent Island. How did they get there from the town of Ruin, which is on the other side of the earth? Well, deep in the town of Ruin's Catapult, there is a teleporter which we can use to travel to the Crescent Island wing. It is here we find not only the ship, but also an airship. Joined by Cid and Mid, who had their own goofy adventure to get here, we repair the airship docked in the bay. Using it to fly back to the town of Ruin, we see a troubling sight. A massive fortress rises from the ground. This was from a civilization that existed long ago, the same one that built Catapult, who were also amplifying the Earth Crystal to make the flying fortress before realizing the same thing we did, the crystal would shatter, resulting in them burying the fortress. After collecting some adamantite from Galuf's meteorite to upgrade the airship and allow it to fly to the great heights of the fortress, we begin our assault. The infiltration goes well. We make it deep inside before running into the King of Tycoon and a monster whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Slaying the beast, we realize we have been tricked. The king was being controlled by Exdeath and we have just granted him access to the last crystal. Luckily, while we are on our last legs, a 4th meteorite comes crashing down, and inside, a little girl who we have seen before, Galuf's granddaughter Kryl. The sight of her fully restoring Galuf's memory. She saves us from Exdeath, but the small victory is short-lived as the strain put on the crystal causes it to shatter. All 4 crystals are broken. Exdeath is free. He immediately teleports to the crystal room, revealing himself to us for the first time. He drains the power from the crystals so that we are unable to access the power held within, but the real King of Tycoon regains control, and through his sacrifice, we are able to harness them. Narrowly escaping the fortress falling out of the sky, the party regroups. Exdeath's assault on Galuf's world has begun. He and Krile must return there to stop him. The party offers to come along, but he insists this is his fight to finish. Using the meteorite to travel back, Bart, Lena and Faris reconvene. What do they do now? Do they return to their lives? Does Bart return to being a wanderer now that their quest has, albeit in an undesirable way, concluded? No. They have a duty, not just to the world they have been chosen to protect, but to, I'd like to think more importantly, their friend, Galuf. He came to save Bart's world, now they must go to save Galuf's. After collecting the energy from the 4 meteorites scattered around Bart's world with the adamantite, the pathway is opened, allowing the group to travel to Galuf's world. They say goodbye to their home, understanding they may never see it again. And they are partially correct. While they will return here soon, it will by no means be the same place that they left behind. Crossing the boundary between worlds, we awake on a tiny island in the middle of an ocean. Later that night, our camp is interrupted by an abductor who takes us to the dungeons of Exdeath's castle. In here, Exdeath uses us to halt the invading army led by Galuf under threat of our execution. To save us, Galuf splits off from the army, infiltrating the castle and rescuing us himself. On the path of our escape, we cross Big Bridge, fighting off hordes of Exdeath minions before confronting his top general, the man, the myth, the legend, Gilgamesh. Fending him off, we are nearly across Big Bridge when Exdeath reactivates the barrier around his castle, the force of which blows the party to the other side of the world, onto Cape Glossina. Making our way down past the small town of Rigol and the mysterious sealed cave, we reach the Moogle forest which, after following a lost Moogle through the underground waterway and across the desert, leads us to the Moogle village. Here, they are able to psychically communicate with Krile's own Moogle, letting her know our location so she can pick us up on Baal's Windrake. Baal, by the way, is the name of the kingdom Galuf leads. The journey back to the castle takes its toll on the Windrake though. He has fallen ill and needs dragon grass to cure, similar to what Hiryu needed back on Bart's world. To get it, the party journeys through Quelb, a town of werewolves headed by a fellow member of Galuf's Dawn Warriors, Kalga, to reach Drakenvale. A much cooler name by the way, rather than North Mountain. Defeating the dragon flower impersonating the dragon grass, we drag our way back to Baal, but before we can heal the dragon, we are stopped by worrying news about Krile. She has been taken ill by strong headaches, the result of being called by a centuries-old sage named Guido. With a recovered Drake, we head over to its island, but before we can enter, Exdeath sinks the cave. It seems our meeting will be delayed until we have the means to travel underwater. Said means becoming available to us very soon. As atop the Drake, the party rendezvous with another Dawn Warrior, as well as king of a neighbouring army, Zezat. His plan is simple. In order to break the shield on Exdeath's castle, we need to destroy the core of one of its barrier towers upholding it. However, before we can begin our assault, we are ambushed by a squad of Exdeath's goons, led by none other than Gilgamesh and his trusty sidekick Enkidu. But once again, we send him scurrying, allowing us to use an underground tunnel Zezat has built along with a submarine to make it underneath the tower. The infiltration goes well at first. Zezat is able to reach the generator while we slay the Atmos guarding the antenna. However, the inevitable hiccup comes in the form of Zezat's noble sacrifice, blowing up the generator so we can fully shatter Golbez's barrier. Before we can begin the assault in earnest though, we use the submarine from the infiltration to visit Guido in his sunken cave. There, the Turtle Sage tells us of Exdeath heading towards the Forest of Moor to retrieve the power of 4 crystals within the Guardian Tree before revealing a little more of his backstory. You see, Exdeath comes from the Forest of Moor. The trees in this forest are sentient, and for generations they have offloaded their negative energy into one tree. Eventually, that negative emotion became so heavy, so condensed, that it birthed a being able to break free of the Guardian Tree heading the forest. That tree is Exdeath. After receiving this news, we too head straight to the forest, but are shocked when Exdeath sets a large portion of it ablaze. By the time we make it to the Guardian Tree, it's on its last legs. Inside the tree, we are attacked and mistakenly subdue the 4 crystals. This gives Exdeath the opportunity to appear and take their power for himself, using them to nearly kill the party. Krile arrives, trying to save the party like how she did on Bart's world, but her efforts are pointless when Exdeath captures her. While Krile was not able to directly save the day, she does so indirectly, as it is her capture that lights the flame within Galuf, giving him the strength to fight. Motivated to save his granddaughter, he initiates a fight with Exdeath, and by going way beyond his limits, using every last ounce of strength he has, he forces Exdeath to retreat. But this power comes at a cost, a heavy one. as not long after his heroic moment, he dies, passing the Earth Crystal's essence with all the power he has gathered on his journey so far to Krile. She is now a warrior of light, following in the footsteps of her grandfather, joining the party as his replacement. Now, it's personal. It's time to take the fight to Exdeath's doorstep. At his castle, we dispel the illusion and reveal the true, disgusting nature of the domain. Near the top, we once again confront Gilgamesh. We see his human side in this encounter as he expresses sadness over the news of Galf's passing. But Exdeath is long past humanity and banishes Gilgamesh to the void for his prior failures and growing empathy. It is here that we fight him, having an epic battle that results in us putting down the beast. In the afterglow of our victory, the entire world is rocked by a massive earthquake, rendering the party unconscious before waking up in a field similar to the one they initially woke on in Galf's world. The party get their bearings by spotting Castle Tycoon in the distance. They must be back on Bartz's world. That night, the castle holds a grand ball, with Princess Lena and Ceresa, Faris by the way if you forgot, overseeing it. I won't get another chance to mention it, but this is the game's big dance moment, Final Fantasy's most recurring motif. This is a dance extremely reminiscent of the Final Fantasy II one. A great ball held under the context of victory our heroes think they've won without realizing their job isn't over. Bartz and Krile especially can't shake this feeling of unease, that something is wrong. So, they head off without the princesses to explore a bit and see why. As we make our way around the world, an unease grows in the player. Why can't we see the world map in the top? Why does the layout feel so weird? Is this really the world we left? Passing Tool, we stumble upon an antlion den. We are rescued by Faris, who has decided that being a princess just isn't for her. She's with us on this journey to the end. Continuing on, the growing unease cements itself when we enter Guido's cave. This shouldn't be here. The sage confirms the current state of affairs. Bartz's and Galuf's worlds have merged, creating a third world map, what I'll refer to as the merged world. During this revelation, Krile feels something, a sharp pain. It seems a splinter has stuck to her foot. When the pain grows to levels unusual for a splinter, we get the reveal that that isn't a normal splinter. It's Exdeath. That's right. After defeating him in his castle, he turned himself into a splinter and attached himself to Krile. That evil, spoony bastard. Having regained his form, he reveals to us the true nature of his plan all along. By merging the two worlds, he can fully harness the power of the Void, a space that used to exist trapped between the worlds, to become unstoppable. Channeling this power, he begins consuming parts of the merged world, such as Bartz's home, Lix, as well as Castle Tycoon, where the party believe Lena is. Exdeath then turns his attention to us, engaging Guido in a battle that results in us getting thrown out of the cave. We find ourselves next to the Library of the Ancients. In Galuf's world, we found half of something called the Sealed Tome. Here lies the other half, which the two world scholars work together to solve. With it, we form a plan that will last the rest of the game. As we are now, we are not strong enough to defeat Exdeath. In order to gain the power needed to do so, we need the 12 legendary weapons used thousands of years ago to defeat a parallel to Exdeath anywhere locked within the sealed castle. To break the lock on the weapons, we need 4 tomes scattered around the world. We are guided to the location of the first tome inside the Pyramid of Mor, obtaining it and awakening the King of Summons, Bahamut, who goes on to rest on the northern mountain. Heading back towards the Library of the Ancients, we are stopped in an outcropping of forest where the Guardian Tree now rests by Hiryu, Lena's Windrake. Before the castle was sucked into the void, he protected Lena and took her to us. However, right now, that isn't Lena. She's being possessed by one of Exdeath's generals, Melusine. Exdeath then sucks more towns into the void, including the Library of the Ancients. To free Lena from Melusine's control, Hiryu sacrifices himself, crashing into her to separate the two, allowing us to fight and slay the monster. Thanks to Hiryu's noble sacrifice, the gang's back. Together, we travel to the airship docked near Surgate Castle just to see Exdeath suck even more towns into the void. The stakes are real and serious. From here, the final dungeon is open to us. Heading into the Void Gate located where Castle Tycoon once stood, we can begin the attack on Exdeath. But Guido's words ring through our head. We are not strong enough to defeat him. So, to that end, we explore the merged world. Some highlights of our exploration include gathering the 3 other tomes and unlocking all 12 legendary weapons, obtaining powerful summons like Leviathan, Phoenix and Bahamut, learning the strongest magic in the game, Holy, Flare and Meteor. We also explored the town trapped between worlds, the Phantom Town, and finally obtain the last hidden job, Mime. Much more prepared now, it's time. We venture into the Interdimensional Rift. Here, we fight through many powerful foes, the game's coolest looking bosses in a collection of the game's coolest looking locations. We also avoid our fair share of powerful foes. While these technically aren't the first super bosses in the series, that title goes to Final Fantasy I and the War Mech, I can't lie, this really feels like the beginning of something big. Here, we can see and try our hand against the iconic Omega and Shinryu. Following the defeat of one of the most powerful generals, Twintania, we have reached the home stretch, the final floor. Here, we free a captured Gilgamesh, who we have come to develop a strange friendship with. While we think he has left, when we are fighting the Necrophone, he returns. He sacrifices himself to help Bartz lay low the monster. Soon after this, we confront Exdeath, who immediately traps the party in the void. In a seemingly hopeless situation, we are greeted by the Dawn Warriors. All of them together, Galuf, Zezat, Kalga and Dorgan, hold off the void, allowing the party to return and bring the fight to Exdeath. His phase 1 sees us fighting his true form, a horrific tree monster chasing us around the final floor, but bringing it down is just the beginning as a new beast emerges. Exdeath has completely merged with the Void, becoming a monstrous amalgamation of all the beings trapped in the Void called Neo Exdeath. We are able to kill it, and the world is returned to peace. Depending on if anyone was dead at the end of the final boss, multiple endings can play, each a bit different regarding how they refer to party members being alive or dead. But let's focus on the good ending, the one where all 4 Warriors of Light survive the final boss. Since the confrontation, the party has mostly gone their separate ways. We then see Kryl, 1 year later, return to the Guardian Tree where her grandfather died. Although she should be happy, she can't help but feel lonely. She first lost her grandfather, and now she feels she's lost her new family. But Bartz is here to console her, with the most important quote in the game. "What are you talking about? You're not alone." Lena, Faris, and himself jump down from atop the tree. It's time to go on another adventure, together. And that, ladies and gents, is the story of Final Fantasy V. I hope you enjoyed my retelling. From here on out, this video is going to shift gears a bit. We're going to focus on analysis rather than retelling, giving you an insight into what this game is trying to say in regards to its characters, story, tone, and especially the gameplay systems. All of it is in service of helping us answer the question that defines my series of Final Fantasy videos. What does it mean to be a Final Fantasy game? What will Final Fantasy V contribute to the complex answer of that question? You're about to find out. Let's begin by talking about the most important part of every Final Fantasy game, the characters. Before we get into specific examples, there's some really interesting comparisons to be drawn from this game to its predecessors, mainly Final Fantasy 3 and 4. Final Fantasy 4 was the start of what I'm calling the visionary era, the definition I gave in my Final Fantasy 3 video being a time where every game, in its own way, defined a core aspect of Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 4's contribution to that was character. It was a standout feature of the game. It elevated the series so much in how it developed and changed them across the game. While that same elevation is evident in Final Fantasy V, it's a different kind. What I mean by that can be summarized like so. Final Fantasy IV's characters were all about change, about growth. Final Fantasy V, on the other hand, does not change its characters. They are, for the most part, stagnant throughout the game. But that is by no means a bad thing. Let's use an analogy. You have 2 buckets. The first is 1/2 meter wide and 1 meter deep. This bucket is Final Fantasy IV. A few emotionally deep and interesting characters I can really get invested in. The next bucket is 1 meter wide and 1/2 meter deep. This bucket is Final Fantasy V. More characters I am interested in and feel something for, but all of them with less depth and nuance than their Final Fantasy IV counterparts. Both buckets have the same amount of water, the same amount of enjoyment I feel towards them. It just comes down to your taste, what you prefer over the other. But Final Fantasy IV is only half the comparison. I expect to be talking about Final Fantasy III a fair bit during this analysis, and that's because of a really interesting parallel I've caught. Final Fantasy III was a remake of Final Fantasy I in a post-Final Fantasy II world. Final Fantasy V is a remake of Final Fantasy III in a post-Final Fantasy IV world. There are so many connections, thematic and otherwise, between the 2 games that are impossible to ignore. When it comes to those connections between the main party specifically, I'm not referring to characterization. The Final Fantasy III Onion Knights were blank slates. They had about as much shared dialogue throughout the whole game as the opening of Final Fantasy V has. I'm more so referring to how character is built and defined through both games' job systems. If you make Bartz a melee-focused character, that influences how you see his character. If you build Galuf into a tank, then that gets passed on to Kryl, that heavily influences how you see her character. The best way to compare the two can be done by imagining, to your left, a blank piece of paper, and to your right, a colouring book. It is up to you, in both cases, to colour in the blanks and make something out of what you are given. It's just that the colouring book, Final Fantasy V, already has the outlines to guide what you choose to make of your image. I've either cooked with these analogies or flops. I think they're good, but I don't know. I hope they helped you picture what I was getting at. Either way, that's the broad view. Let's get into specifics, going through some of the key characters in FF5, starting with the most important character in every Final Fantasy, its main protagonist, Bartz. I said in my Final Fantasy IV video that in many ways, the protagonist sets the tone of the Final Fantasy game. Who they are, what they want, and how they get it are the key here. In Final Fantasy IV, we had Cecil. The opening scene of him commanding a military force who had just massacred innocents shows right off the bat how serious the stakes are for him. On the whole, he was a tragic character, a man steered into darkness by misguided faith, who needed to escape that hole through the forgiveness of others and himself. Pretty serious stuff all in all, and the world surrounding Cecil reflected this. It was dark, gritty, and full of tragedy. Now let's look at Bartz. Our first view of him could not be more different. It's of him relaxing in a peaceful forest surrounded by lush greenery. He is a man without the duty and responsibility that bound Cecil. He is free. And it's that word that's so essential to understanding Bartz's character. Freedom is his core motivator throughout the story. To understand that, we need to go over his backstory. When we visit Lix, we get multiple flashbacks that paint a really sad picture of Bartz's childhood. We see him as a kid playing hide and seek. He goes to hide, but the kid he's playing with never comes to find him. He is left alone atop the roof. He doesn't fit in with the small town life Lix is offering. We also see a flashback to a conversation between Dorgan, his father, and his mother, Stella. She asked Dorgan to stay, to live with herself and Bartz, but in a private moment with Bartz, he decides to leave. Dorgan is a wanderer by nature, someone who doesn't belong in one place, shown by how he left his homeworld behind after stealing Exdeath to live on Bartz's. This pull to adventure is something he will soon instill on Bartz in the next part of his life, which starts at the end of this cutscene, with Stella collapsing in the kitchen, heavily implying, giving the context of the cutscene, that this is how she died. Right in front of her son and her husband. This whole story is beautifully capstoned by visiting a grave in a clearing of forest. Bartz confides in Faris the rest of his story, that after Stella died, he and his dad left Lix to explore the world. They did this for 3 years, more than enough time for Bartz to grow into a man like his father, one who lives for the next adventure. But unfortunately, the good times don't last, and Dorgan grew sick, soon dying and being laid to rest next to his wife here. Ever since, Bartz has been wandering, always on the move with his trusty friend Boko, his father's wish for him to explore the world ringing in his ear. However, when the world of Final Fantasy V is in need and calls upon a hero, Bartz answers the call, just like his father once did. He sacrifices his freedom to take up the duty of defeating Exdeath, of finishing the job his father started, motivated at all times by the desire to be free again. To be free to explore and live his father's wish, to be in a world free of Exdeath, to live free with friends who understand him, something he's never had. While Bartz is the most central character to the story, and, I would argue, its most complex character, that is by no means implying the remaining party members are not interesting, just simpler. Let's start with Lena. Her primary motivation is set up in the very first scene of the game when she is saddened by her father needing to leave to check on the Wind Crystal, eventually going after him once the crystal shatters. She is motivated by her love for her father. From the moment the king is taken by the crystal to when he sacrifices himself for the Earth Crystal, she's on this journey to find and reunite with him. We see this strong desire to find and protect her father in this scene at the Earth Crystal, where although she knows he is possessed, she refuses to let the party attack him. After his death, this obviously shifts to something less character focused, a broader desire to slay Exdeath as well as just to fight for her new friends Bartz and Galuf, as well as her sister Faris. In terms of plot motivation, that's about all I was able to pick up. However, that isn't all there is to her character. She is strongly connected with a major theme of the game. Before we touch on that, let's first set up Faris, as she too shares this trait. Faris is a mix of Bartz's and Lena's motivations. On the Bart side of things, Faris wishes to be free, to sail the seas with a pirate crew again and live the life she has grown up knowing. However, after meeting Lena and recognizing herself as the Princess of Tycoon, she becomes deeply invested in her family, siding with Lena when the party confronts the possessed king, as well as shifting up her lexicon when talking about her father to be something far from what you'd expect from a pirate. Okay, now, what do Lena and Faris share? They share a deep love and connection to animals. Lena cares deeply for Hiryu, her Windrake, as well as Hiryu's equivalent in Galuf's world. In both cases, she is willing to hurt herself just to heal and keep those creatures safe. To Lena, These Drake's health are just as important as her own, and this dedication is reflected back when both Drakes save her from peril in kind. Varys also shares this love, but towards her serpent, Sildra. As a child, Varys was separated from Tycoon when she was thrown overboard, being taken in by the pirates. Her best friend growing up was Sildra. She cares for Sildra as much as anyone in the party, her love for the animal being repaid by Sildra saving her from the sinking at the Tower of Walls and then becoming a summon willing to help fight by her side. The next two main party members, Galuf and Crile, go hand in hand. Starting with Galuf, on a surface level he is characterised as a slightly aloof, not super serious old man who wishes to regain his memories at first and then, once they are regained, put a stop to Exdeath. But it goes deeper than that. To fully understand Galuf, we'll have to wait until I get to talking about the game's big three themes. But to give what we need to establish now, Galuf is the embodiment of the theme of generational duty that runs through the entire game. He is here to finish what he started 30 years ago, to free the younger generation from the burden he had to bear, to free not only the party, but his granddaughter, Crile. But Galuf fails in his mission. He is not able to spare the younger generation from having to bear his burden, to fight his fight, and that failure is best represented in Crile's character. She is the consequence of Galuf's failure, the cost of generational duty. A kid, forced into a fight she has no business fighting. I'll leave it there for now, but we'll be getting more into this and a lot more supporting examples of this theme very soon. Moving on from the main party, let's talk main villain, Exdeath. Like so many of the characters so far, he is intertwined with a core theme of the game, environmentalism. We'll go over all that very soon, but let's focus in on character. Exdeath is evil. But also a little goofy. I mean, if you're saying wah ha ha ha, like come on, I can only take you so seriously. There's also the really funny plot point that to escape death, he turns himself into an evil splinter. Like, seriously, I laughed my ass off when playing when that happened. This is in no way trying to take away from his character, by the way. I love that he isn't a superimposing threat like Golbez was. It really fits with the tone of the game. He's a fun villain that fits well into the type of game Final Fantasy is, a light-hearted adventure. Now, before we move on to the next big topic, I wanted to quickly cover some side characters of note. Let's start with Cid and Mid. Cid is mostly the same character as every other Cid we've come across up to now. He's a genius engineer who architects the game's progression of exploration. This game's unique flair to the character comes in the form of Mid, and how he aids Cid through his darkest hour. Between Karnak and the Library of the Ancients, Cid is a wreck. As the man who designed the amplified technology, he feels immense guilt for the shattering of the crystals, not wanting to invent anything again because it may turn out the same. It's only through the encouragement of Mid, his grandson, that he's able to be spurred back into action. They are a pair of characters equally important to each other. Next honorable mention, Gilgamesh. I couldn't skip over this guy. Final Fantasy is known for having every numbered entry be completely self-contained, with extremely little to no story overlap. Things like the world it takes place in and the main party characters are completely different. Even the carryovers that relate more so to the story, like eventually Biggs and Wedge or Cid, are completely different people. Although the Final Fantasy IV and V Cid share many character traits, they are not the same person in continuity. Gilgamesh is the only example of a character that I can think of that breaks this mold. The Gilgamesh we see in Final Fantasy V is, at the very least, the Gilgamesh we see in one future Final Fantasy game. I say at least because I want to cover my ass in case I'm misremembering, but if I can be bold, I'm gonna say it's the same Gilgamesh in every game he's in. This puts him in a really unique spot, as someone will get more and more endeared to every game he appears. He doesn't get a reset like Cid does game on game. So how does Final Fantasy V set up this legendary character? Well, it starts by positioning him as the likable rival. Although he's on Exdeath's side, he's never malicious. He's funny, then he's respectful, then he's admirable. He fights us for the love of the game because he wants to grow stronger to match the person he sees as his rival, Bart. Now, admittedly, I am cheating a bit here as this information is mostly gleaned from one of his more recent appearances, but regardless, it tracks with what we see here. Gilgamesh was always a joy to fight, a highlight of this game. The final character I want to cover here before we move on is Guido, the turtle sage we encounter throughout the game. In previous Final Fantasy, this archetype has mostly been pretty boring. The first, and probably worst, example that comes to mind is Fusoya from Final Fantasy IV. We meet him and are immediately bombarded with a massive exposition dump with little room for character to peek through. All his speaking roles in that game are like that. The little characterization he gets in combat is not enough to outweigh all the exposition he gives in the story. Guido is a monumental improvement from Fusoya. Why? Because this turtle is fucking hilarious. I'm not kidding. It feels like every second line spoken from this guy is gold. He perfectly weaves the comedy with the explaining. He is still the major expositor, but it's so much more interesting to listen to because of this. And really, it all comes down to writing. Dialogue from Guido feels like one of the rare examples where you can't at all tell this game was localized. It honestly feels like these scenes were written for English with how witty and just fun they are. Okay. First Exdeath, then Gilgamesh, and now Guido? These characters all sound pretty goofy, don't they? Isn't this a serious game? Didn't you mention themes earlier? How can you say this is a game made to be taken seriously when there are these clown show characters who, I can imagine, take weight out of the story? Those, my dear viewer, are excellent questions. And to answer them all, we'll need to shift our focus a little to talk more about tone. The tone of Final Fantasy V is a dying breed. I find it really hard to imagine a modern AAA game replicating what Final Fantasy V did. Even speaking solely within the context of Final Fantasy, only one other game was able to pull off, and arguably succeed, what they did here, that being Final Fantasy IX. So what did they do here that's so special? Here's a one-word answer you can take away from this video. Whimsy. Final Fantasy V is a whimsical game. Now, what does whimsical mean in the context of Final Fantasy V? Let's start with the fun component. There are many more cutscenes in this game than prior ones, many of them not really advancing the plot or character arcs. But they are all important because they either build early on in the game or maintain later into the game the whimsicality. Let's take this cutscene early on in Toul with Zek. When we first speak to him in the day, he's a goofy old man. Oh no, I forgot where I put my key. We are meant to find this character funny and amusing. However, by night, we speak to him in private and find the man to be much more complex, intentionally not giving us the key because he cares for Lena's safety. Or how about this cutscene atop the North Mountain? The game juggles both the funny moment of Bart stressing that he doesn't like heights and being scared with the emotional, Lena's struggle and sacrifice to heal the Windrake. You may think it's a strange pairing, but it really isn't. To put it simply, the comedy of Final Fantasy V means that the tragedy never feels depressing like it did in Final Fantasy IV, whereas the tragedy means that the comedy always feels grounded. But these character moments are not the only contributors to this amazing blend. There are many others, like OST. If you've seen my previous stuff, which by the way you totally should, there's some really good analysis in there I promise, you know I love to talk about OST. To paraphrase from my last few videos, OST is one of, if not the most powerful weapon a game creator has in their arsenal to convey emotion. And with the Go Uematsu at the helm, this goes doubly so. The standout track for me here is the main theme that plays whenever you open the game. It reminds me a lot of Eternal Winds, the world map theme from Final Fantasy III, in the feeling of unbound adventure it conveys. When I listen to this song, I get excited to travel around an unfamiliar world, meet new people, and have a boatload of fun doing so. Then there are the world map themes. Another previous statement I've made is that each Final Fantasy world map theme is a representation of the tone and spirit of that respective game. Does Final Fantasy V uphold this trend? Yes, and in a really interesting way too. This game has 3 world map themes. Bart's world theme is called Four Hearts, and it's an extended opening to a song that never really arrives. The first, 30 seconds are spent setting up a muted chorus that itself feels like it's setting up something else. It feels incomplete, like the beginning. And this takes us into Galuf's world's theme, Unknown Lands. Like the title suggests, this one is steeped in mystery. Where are we? Will we return home? In the mystery is also a feeling of loss. In the context of the wider story, this plays after we have already lost to Exdeath. He destroyed the 4 crystals. We are here trying to take back ground that we lost. But all hope isn't gone. As the song ends on a lighter note, maybe we can slay Exdeath and return everything to normal. But things will never be the same. An incredible musical choice the game makes is, when we return to the merged world, it plays Bart's world's theme. The party doesn't know the worlds are merged. Hell, the player doesn't know either. The game is actively trying to deceive you with the lack of world map and its theme. But after the true nature of the world is revealed, we get our final world map theme, A New World. This is a much slower tempo than previous songs, much more somber. We've been taking L's after L's, and this theme reflects the sadness that the party carries at this point in their journey due to Exdeath's destruction of the merged world, as well as, of course, Galuf's death. The message you get from this theme is simple. you must defeat Exdeath. The 3 world map themes are a musical journey that together represent the tonal arc the game takes. Now, a quick side note on OST before I move on, but holy shit, this game has some absolute bangers. The North Mountain theme, legendary. Exdeath's Castle, I have PTSD. The Final Battle theme, Holy Peak. And of course, last but definitely not least, arguably my favourite OST in any game I've done so far, Battle on the Big Bridge. I'm not gonna begin to put into words how I feel about this track because anything I write will be underselling how highly I think of this masterpiece. But I mean, like, come on, listen to this. It's perfect in every sense of the word. Whew, okay, no more OST talk. I need to stop myself. I can talk forever on this stuff. Last detail I want to cover to wrap up this section on tone is some awesome environmental storytelling details I caught while playing. These are things that, while each individually are small, really add up to make such a great impact. There are some awesome examples of the game using random encounters to tell a story. Take the encounters you can get outside of Licks, the extremely weak Nutkin and stray cats. In this part of the story, we destroy these things, but that's not the point. Imagine your kid Bart with a budding love of adventure. You venture outside of your small village and what are you encountering? Weak enemies you can train against to grow. These are the types of enemies Bart was likely encountering when he first began his adventures. They are a relic of the past we can seamlessly see and experience without it being told to us. There's also a similar use of this in one of the dungeons, Jackhole Cave. In town, we hear of how kids are going into the cave to play, to the adults' dismay. When we explore ourselves, we see the cave looted bare, the only enemies being these weak Nutkins and the occasional spectre of death that I assume spares the kiddies who can't massacre Nutkin like we can. But regardless, we are told the story of this location not just through dialogue, but exploration. And this all leads back into tone. These moments feel like I explored somewhere and discovered something that maybe only I noticed. That feeling is priceless for a game. By rewarding a player's curiosity, it creates a level of connection and interest in the world that is so incredibly hard to replicate otherwise. Now, what if we transfer that interest in the world of Final Fantasy V to the story? What do we get out of it? What is the game trying to say? Well, strap in baby, because we're about to talk about themes. Final Fantasy V has 3 big, overarching themes that connect all the elements of this game together, from the environments, to the tone, to the characters, to the story, and to the job system. The first is freedom. Everyone in the main party wants, in some way, to be free, and that desire is felt directly and indirectly throughout the whole game. The second is environmentalism. The world of Final Fantasy V is, in equal parts, a benevolent and malevolent force. That benevolence represented through the animals and main party, that malevolence represented through Exdeath. And finally, generational duty. Our main party is, in story and gameplay, powered through the sacrifices and strength of the ones who came before us. The price of that strength? We must carry the same burden, the same duty that they did. Okay, so, freedom. What do you mean every party member wants to be free? Well, Bartz and Faris are already defined from the characterization discussion. Bartz wants to be free to explore the world and live his father's wish for him, while Faris wants to be free to explore the world with a pirate crew. So how about the rest? Well, Lena wants to be free to live with her father. She desires and fights for his recovery so she can be with him again. She also, by the end of the game, wants to be free to explore the world once again with her friends. For Galuf, he desires a world free of Exdeath, a world he can raise Krylin, feeling he's done his part to make safer. Kryl, similar to Lena, wishes to be free once again with her grandfather, but, like Lena, when that is taken away from her, she wishes to be free to explore the world with her friends. But that's only the beginning of freedom's prevalence in the game. Let's talk chocobos. Ever since their inception way back in Final Fantasy II, they've been the adorable, lovable birds that get us safely from point A to B, and that cuteness is only enhanced in Final Fantasy V with the introduction of Boko. His appearance throughout the game for cute, wholesome moments endeared me more to the birds than all the first 4 games combined. But that's besides the point. How do they relate to the theme of freedom, and what does this prevalence of them matter to that end? Well, in every game they are in, chocobos are a vehicle of exploration, and an effective one at that. They get you around the world map with no random encounters, allowing you the level of freedom that can only be attained usually through vehicles. You think of a chocobo and your mind goes to an adventurer charting unknown lands atop his trusty friend. That's freedom. That's what these birds represent, and their front stage spot in Final Fantasy V reinforces the message majorly. Chocobos are also intertwined with a key motif that also plays to this theme, the wind. Traditionally, the wind is a symbol of freedom, able to go wherever it pleases, whenever it pleases. This idea is present throughout Final Fantasy V. The game's inciting incident is the wind dying, a representation of the freedom the characters, Bart especially, had before Exdeath began to re-emerge, dying. It's also telling that this force is blessed unto Bart specifically, who can feel the wind calling him. While the game labels the essence passion, I believe infusing the protagonist, whose primary characterization is a man who goes wherever the trail leads him, with the traditional symbol of freedom is telling of its importance. There's also a ton of other wind iconography that goes hand in hand with this idea. The very first cutscene when you open the game is Bart riding along with the wind noticeably ruffling his hair. The final cutscene, where the characters are all in the same position Bart was in the opening. And finally, there's the Windrake. His connection to wind should be obvious, hint hint, it's somewhere in the name, but his importance to the theme is a little less obvious. Taking a look back at Final Fantasy logos, the images are always really important to look at. They give a great insight into what those games are about. I won't go through all of them, but let's take a look at Final Fantasy IV specifically. The image there is of Kain, one of the game's most important characters, who was essential to decoding that game's core message of forgiveness. Now, let's look at Final Fantasy V. That's the Windrake. Just as Kain and his lesson of forgiveness was core to Final Fantasy IV, the Windrake and the theme of freedom is just as core to Final Fantasy V. There was one more point I had to talk about in relation to freedom and how it's integrated into the combat system, but I like the ending, so I'll save it for that discussion coming up very soon. But the TLDR to give here is that it too is a system that integrates the most amount of player freedom in any Final Fantasy yet, and hell, the most amount of player freedom than the vast majority of all Final Fantasy games. So, what else is there to chomp on? Ah, yes, environmentalism. I touched on his involvement with this theme a little earlier, but the prime example here is Exdeath. If you recall, Exdeath is a tree. He was given life by the Guardian Tree and the forest pouring negative emotions into one tree in specific, eventually giving it life. But to understand what the game's getting at with this character, we need to elucidate a minor but important detail. The negative emotions the Guardian Tree used to make Exdeath were not the emotions of the forest, but humanity's. Also, think about what form Exdeath takes throughout the game. Why does a tree appear as a human? It's because the negative emotions that made him are those of man, therefore resulting in him taking that form. Things get really interesting if we go off this assumption, as it frames Exdeath as the embodiment of humanity's disregard for nature. This disregard is seen throughout the game, mainly through the amplification of the crystals. As technology advances, the world of Final Fantasy V pays the price. Like how people destroy the crystals, Exdeath destroys the Forest of Moor. He ensures the crystals are destroyed. He teleports large swaths of the environment into the void. He wants to destroy all of nature and have it consumed by the nothingness of the void. But like how the world of Final Fantasy V birthed this monster, this vessel of humanity's worst feelings towards nature, it must balance it by birthing its savior. By blessing our main party with the power of the crystals, the power of the world, it frames the subsequent clash as one between destruction, as represented by Exdeath, versus preservation, as represented by us. But the environment isn't limited to nature. Animals are of equal import. Final Fantasy is no stranger to the heroic sacrifice. Hell, it became a bit of a meme in my FF3 and 4 videos. And while FF5 continues this trend, it takes a mostly different approach. This time, it is in equal measure people and animals who are the primary emotional sacrifices. The best examples of this are Sildra and Hiryu. In both cases, they are cared for deeply by a human, Varus and Lena respectively, and care for their human back in equal measure. These creatures are pure, they hold no malice like people do, they feel love, and yet they are the primary victim of Exdeath's attacks on the world, both dying in situations that only happen because of his meddling. But through both animals becoming summons, we see and experience them becoming a source of power for the party. By caring for nature, the party grows stronger in their battle against Exdeath. The final thing to talk about before we head into the major discussion of the video is that of generational duty. Now, what do I mean by this? What does it even mean? Great question. Let's illustrate again through our main party, as they are all deeply connected to this theme. Every member of the party is, in some way, connected to a warrior who fought Exdeath. Bart is the child of one of the Dawn Warriors, Dorgan. Lena and Faris are the daughters of the King of Tycoon, who dies fending off Exdeath's might. Kryle is the granddaughter of Galuf, another member of the Dawn Warriors. The duty our main party is on throughout the game, to slay Exdeath, is one passed down from the generation prior to us. We must finish what they started. The single most poignant moment of this theme is Galuf's death. His power, as cultivated through his crystal's essence, being passed on to Kryl is the most literal visualization of this theme possible. But that passing of the torch didn't just happen to Kryl, it happened to everyone, maybe just not as literally. And this idea isn't limited to a video game. If you're a child who grew up with parents in a certain profession, for example doctors, they will likely instill in you that same direction to grow up to also be a doctor, as if it was your generational duty to follow in their footsteps. That idea is beautifully captured through dynamics like these in Final Fantasy V. This theme also extends to a more meta level. Final Fantasy V is the generational descendant, the visionary era equivalent to Final Fantasy III. The connections between these games are so plentiful I'd be here all day listing them out, but if I had to name one, the most telling of them all, it would be these pianos scattered around the game. In various towns, you can play these pianos to slowly grow better and more skilled at it and eventually unlock some bard spells. This niche idea is an exact carryover from Final Fantasy III. In that game, you similarly went around towns and played pianos to eventually get better at it. To my knowledge, this progression of this niche stat appears in no other Final Fantasy. What better way to illustrate a connection than this crazy small detail? But what does that mean? What does it matter that Final Fantasy V is the descendant of Final Fantasy III? It ties back to a small theory I have. I think the Final Fantasy developers, both old and new, really love Final Fantasy III. Small things like its crazy prevalence in Final Fantasy XIV today, or how it is the foundation of the job system, which became the premier Final Fantasy combat gimmick, or how, I don't know, they practically remade the game with Final Fantasy V. Looked at it in this light, the message becomes clearer. Final Fantasy V is a continuation of the legacy created by Final Fantasy III. It's a modern reimagining of one of the most important and overlooked games in the series. There's one more tie-in for this theme, and that is the job system itself. The party gets its powers, literally, from Warriors of Legend. The ultimate weapons are the same ones that were used by these Warriors of Legend. The main party of Final Fantasy V is fueled by the power of the generations that came prior. Like how the Warriors of Legend slew Enero, like how the Dawn Warriors sealed Exdeath, we too must follow in the footsteps of those who came prior to put an end to Exdeath. Alright, I think it's time. In every video I've done, bar Final Fantasy I, which had 3 equally important topics, there's been one thing that I've been most excited to talk about. In Final Fantasy II, it was the leveling system. In Final Fantasy III, it was the first incarnation of the job system. In Final Fantasy IV, it was characters. And now, here in Final Fantasy V, we have reached that one topic. It's time to talk about the second go, and in my opinion, the best version of the job system. It can be hard to talk about combat in video games objectively, solely through the lens of analysis. Out of all the aspects that make a game, it is the one most infused with subjectivity. So, I'll start this mega discussion on combat with that subjectivity, my opinion on the Final Fantasy V combat system. Out of all the Final Fantasy combat systems I've played, meaning everything bar 11 and 13, the Final Fantasy V job system has the second highest potential out of all of them. While the system, in execution, can sometimes falter, the vision of what it is trying to be is just so spectacular and so close to being executed to that level that I can't help but be absolutely in love with it. So, as we proceed along in the analysis, please keep in mind my love of this system as it will be infused throughout. But before we touch on jobs, let's start by focusing on the ATB system. I mentioned in my Final Fantasy IV video that we are going to see this change and evolve. That first evolution, or iteration, I'm not sure yet, is here. In Final Fantasy IV, spells had cast times, I'll call it. You would load a spell, like Bahamut, and it would take some ATB time before it actually goes off. During that game, it had the effect of, for me, nerfing magic for random encounters. In many scenarios, I would kill enemies with my physical damage dealers before I could even get off a spell. Final Fantasy V directly addresses this issue by removing the cast times on spells while keeping it for a very limited but fitting selection of actions, like a Dragoon's Jump. This change improves combat a ton, making it feel so much more snappy and responsive than Final Fantasy IV's, which felt fine in bosses but sluggish in random encounters. This is a good chance also to mention bosses before we get into jobs. They are, universally, much worse in this game than Final Fantasy IV. They are foundational era level bosses, and not in a good way. It was really disappointing to come from Final Fantasy IV, which had incredible bosses, to see this. If I had to wrap this topic up with a tagline, I would say that Final Fantasy IV's combat system is built for an incredible 5% of boss encounters, while Final Fantasy V's is built to make the mundane random encounters much more engaging and exciting. The first set of jobs we get, including Knight, Monk, Thief, White and Black Mage are very stock standard. They are the same jobs we are working with way back in Final Fantasy 1 and again in 3. The exception to this though is the introduction of one of Final Fantasy's most interesting and, while playing the game, pressing conundrums, the Blue Mage. To understand why Blue Mage is fundamentally a conundrum, we must first understand how this job works. It's simple. A Blue Mage learns and is able to cast the spells of enemies. It learns these spells by being hit with them. Here's where the issue lies. With a White Mage, you know what you're gonna get. It's a healer. It'll be healing magic, maybe some status recovery, and maybe a damage spell at the end. Black Mage is the same. It's a wizard. It'll get damage. Blue Mage on the other hand, who knows what you're gonna get, how good what you get is, and how easy it is to get. Now, yes, of course you'll roughly know the gist if you've played one of the other games as Blue Mage. Spells like White Wind or Mighty Guard cross over between games and are roughly the same. But for a first time player, who knows? And even if you've played another game's Blue Mage, how do you know what enemies give what spells? Is Mighty Guard hidden in this game, or did I miss it by killing an enemy too quick? That mystery, the unknown of what you get out of Blue Mage, is so interesting to me, and I imagine it's something every player will feel differently on. Does the mystery excite you and make you want to discover what the job holds? Does it make you want to stay away from the job as you don't know if it'll give reliable spells or not? Whether or not to subscribe to the ways of the blue was a choice I had to make early. I wanted to limit my Google usage as much as possible, so potentially missing Blue Mage spells was a constant fear. The choice I made changed how I looked at combat, specifically random encounters, a ton. I decided I wanted a Blue Mage. So from here on out, every random encounter against a new enemy had filler turns just to see their whole movesets. Every part of the board map got explored in case there was a new enemy with a cool new Blue Mage spell. It made me, through the game's job system, deeply invested in seeing all the enemy types and spells the game had to offer. This really enhanced my playthrough. I feel I got more out of my adventure than if I hadn't run a Blue Mage, indicative of my playtime being more than double Final Fantasy IV's. However, the ways of the blue aren't all sunshine and roses. It comes at a cost. To understand that though, let's move on to our second array of jobs, the Mystic Knight, Berserker, Summoner, Time and Red Mage. By this point in the game, we've begun to level our jobs a bit, but hold the phone Adiris, how does leveling work in this game? In Final Fantasy III, a character's job level directly correlated to that job's stats on that character. If one character had Dark Knight at level 20 and another at level 10, the character with a level 20 job would have higher stats. It didn't matter what other jobs you had leveled up to that point, all that mattered was the level of the job you were currently on. There was no integration between one job and another. Final Fantasy V's mission statement with its job system was to address this lack of integration by making your characters the sum of the individual parts you have leveled across the game. This is done in two ways. I'll talk on one of them, this game's magnum opus, at the end of this whole discussion. Let's focus, for now, on the other one, the one you feel while leveling. Instead of growing stronger as you level a job, you instead learn job-specific actions that can be transferred between any other job. For example, the Blue Mage will learn the ability Learn. With this ability, you can put it on a knight. By doing so, if an enemy hits your knight with a blue magic spell, they will learn the blue magic as if they were on Blue Mage. By the way, when I said Blue Mage came at a cost, it was this. Most jobs only have one ability slot you can choose, so by going the way of the blue, you are restricting one or more characters to never being able to use a second ability slot on another job's learned ability. While this slightly limited my enjoyment, I still had plenty of opportunity to experiment and enjoy the freedom of this system with certain characters. But back on track, this simple idea is where the potential of the job system lies. It encourages the most freedom of any combat system we've done so far, and is how the game integrates this core theme of the story into gameplay. Want a knight that fights with their fists? Equip your knight with barehanded learned from Monk. Want a White Mage who can cast black magic? Equip your White Mage with black magic. Want a Berserker who does crazy damage? Equip him with the knight's ability two-handed. There is so much creative opportunity here. It's so exciting to play. In Final Fantasy V, you build your own customized Warrior of Light with a high degree of freedom. When I think back on Final Fantasy III, one of my issues was the party's lack of individuality. Final Fantasy V perfectly addresses this. From the surface level change of having each job look different on each character, to the much more impactful ability carryover from job to job, Final Fantasy V infuses each main party member with individuality both through the story and the job system. Leveling in this game is so exciting because every time it happens, new possibilities are opening and it's up to the player what they want to do with it. But the leveling experience isn't perfect. In fact, I'd say that while being this game's most shining feature, it hides its darkest flaw. UI. Do you hear that? Sorry, it's nothing, never mind. We soon get our third set of jobs, the Beastmaster, Geomancer and Ninja, before we go off on our UI. Wait, what is that? Oh no. It's back. No, it's the UI! The UI is my most recurring criticism with nearly every Final Fantasy we've done so far, so seeing it be an issue again is sad, but unfortunately expected. My issue with the UI hinges on one assumption I'll make clear now. If you don't agree with what I'm about to say, this is the core of my argument to go after. I believe it is a cardinal sin for a video game to force me to go onto Google to understand one of its gameplay systems or how to progress the story. I think it's the game's job to inform me, either through a good UI or naturally through gameplay, how its fundamental systems work. The Final Fantasy V UI doesn't give me enough information throughout most of the game to make me feel confident in my choice of jobs without the use of Google. As you level, the game doesn't tell you ahead of time what abilities you will unlock. There is no way to know with 100% certainty what abilities a job grants. I imagine different players will respond to this uncertainty in different ways. Most, I'd wager, will just Google it. If that doesn't take those players out of the game, breaking their immersion, then good for them. Unfortunately, I'm just not built that way. If I Google something for a single player RPG, my immersion is temporarily broken. Not to mention that Googling the jobs will expose you to spoilers of what the upcoming jobs are, and it feels immensely unsatisfying to learn what a job does through a web page. Now, I want to take this moment to address some possible rebukes on what I've said. I'll start with the argument for my point, go into the argument against, then rebuke the argument against. You're free to disagree with me here, by the way, or agree with the rebuke. At the end of the day, I want all my videos to be a forum for opinion and not a lecture. Also, just a reminder, you can't rebuke these arguments with just Google it. Okay, let's go. Court is now in session. Take that! The game's limited job EXP, also known as ABP, means that you constantly feel stressed, creating a FOMO that you'll miss out on jobs and cool combinations because you didn't have all the information. Objection! The stress on ABP is only for Bartz's and most of Gallup's world. From XS Castle onwards, ABP is readily available to experiment with jobs. Plus, the Phoenix Tower is an extremely useful resource to get ABP, such a good one that you can likely get every job maxed out across your party to see what they all do. Hold it! XS Castle and onward was the minority of my playtime. Most of my time was spent in the front half of the game, where the player would be feeling the strain. Take that! The game doesn't give enough information diegetically to help you understand what a job will give by leveling. Objection! There is a little blurb under each job that tells you a short summary of them. They should be your guiding force. Hold it! The blurb is very inconsistent. While the blurb for Knight is great, and the Berserker doesn't need an in-depth blurb because of how simple it is, how am I meant to intuit Red Mage will give dual cast, or Ranger give rapid fire from these blurbs? The game should have included NPCs around the world who tell you what these warriors of legend could do. For example, a sage who tells you about the ancient Red Mage who slew Enuo, who could cast 2 spells at once, or the Ranger who could fire many times in an instant. Take that! The lack of information in the UI restricts player choice and their ability to mold their own warrior of light, hurting player freedom. Objection! Knowing what each job gives would act to restrict player choice, but not in the way you think it will. It would discourage experimentation with jobs and encourage optimal min-maxing to get the one-size-fits-all build on everyone. Hold it! Actually, no, wait, that's not a bad point. Okay, I'll consider that one, but still, I think the arguments that the UI is bad outweigh the ones arguing it's good. With that, court is concluded for the day. I hope you guys enjoyed that little edit, but what do you think? I'm open to different ideas here. By the way, remember that important addendum I made at the start of this video about this being my second playthrough of the game? I mentioned how it was very important for this video. This argument is why. You know how I asked what different players would do in response to a system like this? I left out the response that I did, what someone playing on their second playthrough does. They leverage their experience from their past playthrough to remember what jobs give. In this regard, a second playthrough of Final Fantasy V is actually comfier than the first. I already knew going into this I wanted to max Red Mage and Ranger because they were cracked. The lack of in-game communication about them being cracked didn't affect my opinion on the job system. It may be why I'm crazy positive about it. This argument was me trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody playing through the game for the first time, and from that perspective, I think my point stands. Moving on from the UI, we can actually talk a bit more about one of the points raised in the courtroom, the one about min-maxing jobs, as it leads well into a separate discussion on balancing. The best example of this, or tied best rather, can be found in our next 2 jobs unlocked, the Ranger and Bard. Let's focus in on Ranger. At the max level, it unlocks the ability Rapid Fire, allowing attacks to hit 4 times for slightly weaker damage each. This ability is absolutely insane, especially paired with dual wield from a ninja. This trivializes combat when you have it equipped, and I think that's a problem. All jobs in Final Fantasy V are not created equally. Some are objectively better than others. For example, let's take Dragoon. Dragoon is fucking useless. Jump is a horrible ability that, when I was running it, nearly never went off because it takes a full 1.5 ATB bars to actually use, which is crazy, considering most random encounters can be cleaned up in one. The other abilities it learns are also definitely not worth it. Its best one being Equip Lancers, which, slight spoilers for the end of the argument, but you can do anyways on the game's final job. Compare that with Red Mage that, while leveling is arguably weaker than Dragoon, learns at max level the crazy good dual cast, letting you fire off 2 magic spells in a single turn. And considering summons count as spells, yes, this is as OP as it sounds. I won't wonder on the situation where you only level your characters on bad jobs, as that wasn't my experience and I imagine it would result in a very different discussion here. Instead, let's talk on the game's difficulty balance when leveling all the good ones. By the end of the game, it creates 4 absolutely OP characters who trivialize Exdeath. I didn't see some of Neo Exdeath's cool, flashy moves because of this. This is a great time to bring up a point I'm going to make in every Final Fantasy video I do up until at least 10, and I have been making for my last 2. Let's bring back the Final Fantasy Syndrome. The TLDR, if you haven't seen my previous stuff, is this term refers to when poor difficulty balancing creates a situation where you are punished for exploring and experiencing all the game has to offer. It's a plague on Final Fantasy games, something that discourages their shining quality in lieu of a fun, challenging time in combat, and is something, if you want a more modern example, was seen extremely recently in old school Final Fantasy's spiritual successor, Clair Obscur. However, hold on, I don't think this is the time to talk on this. I don't think Final Fantasy V is the first victim of this disease. Let me explain why. The difficulty imbalance in Final Fantasy V is not born from the source needed to be qualified as the Final Fantasy Syndrome, that source being optional content. A game that suffers from the Final Fantasy Syndrome is one where doing the optional content results in the player being way overleveled for the mandatory story content, therefore resulting in very easily, usually later game, story encounters. The source of the imbalance in Final Fantasy V is purely knowledge based, and is something, I'd bet, a player going through the game for the first time not using Google would not come across. In this scenario, the game is not going to suffer from the Final Fantasy Syndrome. We are spared. Will that last? I'm very confident it won't, as I am nearly 99% sure I remember Final Fantasy VI suffering from this, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But back to job imbalance. While playing through the game, I imagine a player would see this as a negative of the job system. And while I think the net effect is slightly negative, there's a mitigating factor that nearly completely makes up for this, that makes every job you level to the max feel worth it, no matter how bad the abilities are or the job was. We're nearly there now, so let's quickly cover the next set of jobs. These are our final, mandatory set we get for the rest of the game, and the last jobs we get until the very end: Samurai, Dancer, Dragoon, and Chemist. These being the last jobs we get, I think, hurts the Gallows World portion of the game up until Exdeath's Castle. The reason for that being the lack of ABP you get throughout most of this part. The job system of Final Fantasy V is interesting and engaging when one of 2 things are happening. Either 1, you are getting new jobs to try and experiment, or 2, you are getting a high amount of ABP to level jobs and unlock new abilities you can experiment with. Bartz's World has the first type of interest. Exdeath's Castle and onwards has the second type of interest. Gallus World lacks both of these. Jobs feel like they are stagnating as, I at least, was stuck playing unfun jobs out of a fear the game would never pick up the ABP pace. This took away the magic and freedom of the system and marked the only low point I can recall for the game. Was it that low in hindsight? Not really, still better than all of Final Fantasy II, but a low point regardless. But after we get back to the merged world, the job system is back. We're switching it up and getting great ABP consistently. And it is on this world we learn about the most genius part of Final Fantasy V. If you were thinking, at any point in this discussion, that the job system lacked a bow on top, a capstone to tie everything together, then you were correct. I've been purposely leaving this feature out of every point we've talked about in this combat section as it relates to all of them. The leveling system, abilities, the UI and job balancing, all are either made even better or nearly completely alleviated by this one feature. Let's talk about Freelancer and Mimic. We learn about these 2 jobs in gameplay. Fuck yes. In the town of Toul. In a change that, by the way, I find immensely charming, the tutorial house in Toul we used way back in the beginning of the game to learn about the basics of combat transforms in the merged world to explain how these jobs work. Their premise is simple. As you max a job, specific stats that job specializes in are transferred to these 2 blank slate jobs. For example, if you max out Knight and Berserker on Bartz, his Freelancer would have enhanced strength and stamina. If you maxed out Thief and Ninja on Kryl, her Freelancer would have enhanced agility. If you maxed out White Mage and Black Mage on Lena, her Mimic would have enhanced magic. So how do you get these jobs? Well, Mimic is something you get from an optional boss in the Sunken Tower of Waltz. In the game's most creative boss fight, he cryptically challenges you to mimic him, but he doesn't move. How are you meant to mimic him if he never moves? Well, you need to figure out that you're meant to also do nothing. Standing still counts as mimicking his inaction. Doing this grants you the game's last job. But what about Freelancer? When did we get the most powerful job in the game? Well, we actually never got it. It was the job we started as. That's right, Freelancer is not only the job you start the game on, but the one you ended on too. This is the most direct evolution from Final Fantasy III's fundamental job system design that I can think of. In many ways, Final Fantasy III was all about continually moving on from old jobs. Some jobs were just direct upgrades from others, and the starting job, the Onion Knight, was redundant unless you were 100% of the game. Final Fantasy V is the exact opposite. These jobs are the embodiment of the freedom the game champions. They encourage the most freedom with the ability system. Freelancer lets you put 2 custom abilities on one job, and Mimic lets you put 3. They encourage the most freedom with what jobs you level. Every job will improve these 2 jobs in some way, with some even granting innate skills. For example, if you max Ninja, you don't need to put the dual wielding ability on Freelancer, it'll get it innately. Every decision you made across the game when it comes to the job system, all your efforts, your preferences for certain jobs, the archetypes you've been following for your Warriors of Light, all of it is reflected, respected, and encouraged by these 2 jobs. It's Final Fantasy V's crowning achievement, the one thing that pushes this game over the edge to reach the next level. The Final Fantasy V job system is incredible. It's symptomatic of something extremely, and I do mean extremely, important for the Final Fantasy series. Final Fantasy games are, when at their best, pioneers of some of gaming's best and most creative combat systems. Be it the original ATB system in FF4, FF5 job system, or the many amazing ones we'll come to talk about in future videos, Final Fantasy V upholds and cements this legacy by making the most fun system of gameplay in Final Fantasy yet. And that, my viewers, is about all I wanted to say on Final Fantasy V. If there's anything I missed, for example dungeons or enemy visual design, it's because I had no hard-hitting thoughts on it. My takeaway on these things were between thinking they're good or really good. So, I'll end this video the same way I started it. If you are going to take anything away from all that I've said, just remember this one statement. We, as Final Fantasy fans, need to give more love and attention to Final Fantasy V. It is easily, without a shadow of doubt in my mind, one of the most underrated games I have ever played. There is no other Final Fantasy game that we have covered up to now, and even that we will cover in the future, that is so fundamentally solid. If the Visionary era is defined by every game bringing something to the legacy of Final Fantasy, to what it means to be a Final Fantasy game, then I would argue Final Fantasy V brought the full and best incarnation of the job system. One of the core pillars of the foundational era, not able to be fully realized at the time, but done so to a masterful degree here. I won't forget Final Fantasy V, and I beg that you don't too. Hold on, wait a sec. If Final Fantasy V is so good, then why has it been overlooked? Ah, that's right. It was placed between one of the most important RPGs of all time, Final Fantasy IV, and one of the best games of all time, Final Fantasy VI.